Hi, welcome back. Hope you're keeping well. And welcome back to my first camera trap setup of the year. I'm out in my usual haunt. I've had my trail cameras, as always, have been out keeping an eye on the area. I have to say, there's a real cold wind here today, a real lazy wind they call it. It's one that goes right through you rather than around you. Anyway, I've had the camera trap set up for probably I think about 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks today. It was. I've had one or two images. Nothing, not exactly what I've been after, but I've got it set up for the foxes. Like I say, I've had my trail cameras set up in this area for a good month or two now, and I've been noticing quite a bit of activity from the foxes. There's been one or two different individuals about, and I've even had a little bit of footage of two foxes together, which is quite unusual. Well, I think it's unusual. I don't think I've ever seen two on the. I don't think I've ever picked up footage of two at the same time, you know, in the same bit of footage. But there you go. So I thought I'd set up and see if I can get a few pictures of them. Any regular viewers of the channel might recognise where I am. It was down here last year. I got some nice pictures of the badgers, and it's a bit of a natural funnel here for the wildlife. If you can see, we got like a flat area with a steep embankment all the way around the side, and right up the top there, and just where the embankment meets the river here, there's a little narrow flat bit that goes off around the corner there. So any animals that are in this sort of general area, this is like a natural funnel for them to come through. So it is a good place, you know, a good opportunity of getting some images of the animals passing through. So I thought, while I was here, I'm just here changing the batteries. Like I say, it's been here 2 weeks now, and I'm just out doing my weekly battery change, and I thought I'd bring you along, and I thought it might be a good idea to discuss something that's always seems to cause a lot of confusion with camera trapping, and that is flash. I thought maybe I'd take the opportunity to give you my 5 top tips when it comes to flash, for you to try for yourself. So I'll set you down, and I'll just check the camera, see if we've got anything on it from the last few nights, and we'll run through some of the best tips for flash. So I'll see you in a minute. Just a couple of nearly shots from the previous night of the foxes. Still waiting for the perfect pose, and as always the usual obligatory images of squirrels. So let's get on and have a look at my 5 top tips for flash. Right, tip number 1, probably one of the most important ones as well, and that is flash placement. Where you place your flash in relation to your camera is really important in getting some nice attractive lighting on your subject. The one thing you really want to avoid is, I've got my camera here, you want to avoid having your flash too close to the camera. It'll give you very unflattering lighting. I always try and get my flashes out at least 45 degrees away from the camera, out to the sides, and I'll have one set up as a main light. Usually I'll try and, if I see on the trail camera footage that animals are coming in from a certain direction, I'll try and get the main light to shine into their face to catch them on the front, and I'll have the fill light just slightly off to one side, just filling in the shadows. If you have your flash in the same line as your camera, you'll always end up with very unflattering lighting. It'll be very flat and harsh. Tip number 2 is to modify your lights slightly. Rather than using the wide angle setting on your flash, zoom it into 75, 85 or 105, whichever mil zoom on it, whichever is the maximum for your flash. If you zoom the head in, it'll give you a nice little pool of light, rather than a wide scatter of light. The other thing you can do is you can put modifiers on it. I very rarely use my flashes these days now without having a modifier of some description on there. Either a honeycomb grid, which helps to focus the light in one area, or a snoot. You can put a snoot around your, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just an old tube or something just to focus the light in one area. Your lighting will be much more attractive if you have little pools of light rather than a wide scatter of light. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is about light ratio. It's the ratio. I always have a 2 light setup, or sometimes a 3 light setup, and you always want to have a ratio between your main light and your fill light. Normally I go for a ratio of 2 to 1 or 4 to 1, which means that the fill light, the main light is to give me the best exposure for the subject. My fill light is just to fill in the shadows, and I like to have the fill light at least 1 stop or maybe 2 stops lower than the main light. It just gives a nice balance. If you have them both at the same power, if you like, it's not necessarily the power. You have to remember that the distance from your subject where the flash goes is also something you need to factor in. But if you have your main light exposed for your subject and your fill light 1 or 2 stops, f-stops lower than your main light, you'll get much more attractive exposure that way. And that's tip number 3. Right, on to tip number 4. And that is the old saying that sometimes less is more applies when it comes to flash. Don't forget, the majority of your photos are going to be either in twilight or at night time, and you don't want great big blasts of high lighting going on. You are trying to emulate sort of moonlight, I suppose. So if when you're setting up, if you can clearly see how bright the flashes are, the brightness of the flash, if they look quite bright when you're setting up in the daylight, they're probably going to be a bit too hot. So I'd always err on the side of caution and just turn them down a little bit, because as the saying goes, less is more. And when it comes to photographing animals at night, then with flash, then this certainly applies. Right, on to the final tip. Tip number 5 is the height of your main flash as opposed to the height of your fill flash. Now, what I always try and do is try and keep the main light up quite a bit higher than the fill flash. The fill flash, I want to fill the shadows. So the main light is sort of emulating moonlight, if you like, and exposing my subject properly, whereas the fill light is there just to fill the shadows. Keep the main light higher than your fill light, and that'll give you another way to get much more pleasing lighting. So I hope that them 5 tips help with your flash. If you have any questions regarding flash at all, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Okay, right, one little bonus tip. If you're using these food containers as housings for your flashes, when you come to take your flashes out, one thing I kept doing all the time was hitting my finger, I was pressing the channel selector button on the side of the receiver, and I kept changing the channels. So in order to avoid that, if you can get yourself some little flash stands, very often they'll come with your flashes, but if not, you can pick them up pretty cheap. Slide that onto the foot of your receiver, and that gives you something you can get hold of as you're inserting and removing the flash from the housing, and it just keeps your fingers away from the channel receiver, the channel selector button on your receiver. Right, well, I hope you found some of them tips useful. Best advice I can give you is to practice. Just get your gear either out in your garden or even in your living room. Just set a couple of lights up, put an object in front of the camera, and just experiment and play. Just try adjusting the height of your lights, the intensity, the zoom on the flash head. Just try a load of different things and just see what effect it has on the lighting on the images. So it's practice, practice, practice. It's never ever a waste of time. Well, that's about it from this one. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up if you'd be so good, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next one.